check. Good morning. I'm Gloria Jean. I'm the committee chair for professional development for NYSCA. I'd like to welcome you to our Zoom series, this one for secondary school counselors on the Regents exams and graduation requirements. Just wanted to let you know this is being recorded, and the recording and the PowerPoint will be available on our website immediately, well, shortly following the presentation. Please keep yourself muted to cut down on background noise, but remember to unmute yourself when it is time to ask questions. We also we'll be monitoring the chat room, and you can raise your hand if you need help. Without any further talk by me, I'd like to turn this over to our host, Jeanette Alomia, our NYSCA VP for secondary level.
Good morning, everyone. As we are in our 4th week for most of us that are have been home and schools have been closed, I hope that you have been trying to settle in, that the dust has settled in, so to speak, and that you have been providing the best school counseling program and services to your students. I am delighted and honored to be here this morning, offering you some great information from our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is Marybeth Casey, Assistant Commissioner from the Office of Curriculum and Instruction and Early Learning from the New York State Education Department. And so Marybeth, I'm sure a lot of you, most of you know Marybeth. She is a fountain of knowledge and a great resource to us all, especially when it comes to the specifics with regards to graduation requirements and specifically we're talking about regents and cancellations and implications to that. And so Marybeth is going to present to us by utilizing and expanding on the FAQs that you all have access to through NYSED and pertaining to specific questions. And then after the presentation, we are opening it because this is for you as high school counselors. This time is for you to ask questions pertaining to maybe specific scenarios or in general that you may have after the the Regents cancellation notice that we just received. And then we're gonna close with comments and wrap things up. And so I'm not taking any more of Marybeth's time because I know we only have an hour. And thank you so much actually for joining us. We have 1,000 counselors across the state. Again, honored, and I'm very delighted to present to you Marybeth Casey. Thank you, Marybeth, for coming. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that nice introduction, Jeanette, and to Gloria Jean also for reaching out to me. I just want to say that I hope all of you and your families are doing well. This is truly my largest audience. Quite honestly, I've been to a number of your regions and done presentations. And while this is sort of an unintended benefit of the COVID closure, to be able to address you directly. And I don't want to take too long with the presentation because the presentation goes into much of what was in the memo and the FAQ, but I'll hit the high points. I want to thank my colleague, Melissa Montague, who I believe is on the line as well. Melissa was really the architect of the beginning of the FAQ. She really captured a lot of the different scenarios that she gets every day in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. For those who haven't had the chance to meet Melissa, please let me tell you, she is an unbelievable asset to my office. She jumped right into the graduation requirements and with both feet and has been doing a remarkable job. And I know she's traveling also to some of your regions over the past year, and I hope you'll continue to include her in your events as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to get started. Jeanette, do you want to give me control, or are you going to do the slides for me?
I'll do the slides for you.
Oh, okay.
Gloria
Thanks,
will do
Gloria. Okay, so the FAQ and the memo covered two basic things during this COVID closure. And the first is, how are students going to earn credit? The other is, how are they going to meet their diploma requirements? So any student who is in a course of study culminating in diploma credit and meets the standards of the provided instruction should be granted that unit of credit or partial unit of credit if it's a half-year course, whatever applies. So as long as they have met the expectations for the instruction provided, outside of the 180 minutes a week, outside of the unit of study requirement, they should be granted their diploma credit. And that's covered in FAQ number 2. So we're going to move on. As far as Regents exams go, we are trying to hold harmless the universe of students that were relying on this June administration of Regents exams to meet certain diploma requirements. And we're trying to hold them harmless for any reason that they might have been taking that exam, being an endorsement, an advanced designation, a regular Regents diploma, or a local diploma. So as long as the student is currently enrolled in the course culminating in the Regents exam and passes the course, and we say earns credit, by June of 2020, they can be exempt from this June's Regents exam, and that exam will not be counted towards their needed diploma requirements. If the other conditions under which they could be granted an exemption, they could have been currently enrolled in the course and they fail the course this June, but if available, summer school comes along and God willing, we'll be back up online or in person rather. If they make up the credit or pass the course in summer school, they are also exempt. Now, we are not making a decision yet on the August Regents. That's to be determined. But if a student makes their credit up this summer, they are also entitled to the exemption regardless of whether we give the August Regents. And then any student who previously earned credit in the course and has been and intended to take the Regents exam because they didn't pass it yet, they are also granted the exemption. Next. So what does it mean to intend to take the Regents exam? It's kind of a hard measurable word there. So we came up with some criteria for you to apply. Either the student informed you he wanted to take it, he or she was intending to take it in June. If the student was in an AIS class, I think we can assume they were intending to take it as well if they were in an AIS class and had failed it previously. Or if they were taking some other type of preparation, maybe they were home tutored, maybe they were tutored after school by their teacher in preparation or intended to be tutored after school during the kind of Regents review period that we always have, typically in June. They could be considered intending to have taken it. Or if they took the exam last year and failed, so in the last 3 administrations, June 2019, August 2019, or January 2020, in an attempt to pass the exam, he or she would also be entitled to an exemption. Next. So how are they going to meet if they're exempt from all these tests, how are they going to meet the requirements for graduation? We are considering this to be almost an individualized remedy for students. So whatever exams they are exempt from come off the sum total of exams they would need to graduate. So it's as if that requirement for that particular student never existed. And that doesn't matter whether or not they're in 9th, 10th, 11th, even 8th grade. Taking an examination. So if they are granted an exemption, it's as if that graduation requirement does not apply to them. Next. We're getting a lot of questions about laboratory experiences. So the very first guidance memo that the department put out, guidance memo, actually it was the second guidance memo that addressed actual student coursework guidance number 2 on our COVID page, was with regard to laboratory minutes. So we understand that especially when it comes to lab minutes, it's very hard for remote learning to cover lab minutes. Remote lab minutes don't count for most schools in terms of meeting the hands-on experiences. So we've exempted students from meeting that 1,200 minutes this year to sit for either the June or the August, if it's available, Regents exam. So however many minutes they've completed to date, and then any virtual labs that they are able to complete, if able to complete, all count towards that, and anything not met is waived. Next. We're also waiving all the +1 pathway assessments that would have been administered in June. So if the student's currently enrolled in a +1 pathway course of study, and that's any pathway, they are exempt from that +1 pathway requirement towards their diploma. If they were previously enrolled, just like the Regents, some pathways are Regents exams, but others are AP, IB, CDOS assessments, any language assessments. If they were previously enrolled and were unable to pass, they are also exempt from that this June. The last 2 bullets on this, or last 2 sections on this slide, are a little confusing. So this was meant to hold harmless those native language speakers who come to us. Now that we have department approved +1 LOTE exams that students can use, there are a number of kind of a large student population, especially in our districts with high populations of ELLs, large populations who are native speakers of other languages. If we have a pathway exam, many of those counselors and districts were scheduling a student to take that pathway exam, even though they didn't take the course of study, right? So with all the other exams, you have to pass the course of study, but we know that native language speakers often take these exams to get one graduation requirement out of the way without having to take the associated coursework. So if you have English language learners whose home language is in one of our +1 pathway exams, and I think we have them in Chinese, French, Italian, Korean, Spanish, and they were deemed qualified by their principal or whomever in consultation with the LOTE faculty likely, said, look, at this student is a fluent Spanish speaker. He does not need to sit for Spanish 1, 2, and 3. Let's give him the +1 pathway, check off a graduation requirement. He's good to go, at least for that aspect of the requirements. He or she is also deemed exempt from that test this year. And the same goes for a student who is fluent in ASL. They don't have to be a deaf student. It could be a family member of a deaf student who's fluent in ASL, or other students who, for whatever reason, are fluent in ASL. And the teachers and administration are aware of that. They were going to sit that student for the ASL exam this June. They are also exempt. So those 2 are a little tricky, but there's sort of a local determination there about who is qualified and who's not qualified to get that exemption. Next slide. CDOS commencement credential, and this slide also applies to the CDOS +1 pathway. So in essence, if you have a student who is not able to fulfill the remaining requirements for the CDOS pathway, and that could be either the coursework, the work-based learning, didn't finish their employability profile or their career plan in their senior year, they are exempt from whatever is left unfinished this year. If they're seniors exiting school, they get their +1 CDOS pathway, if that was the road they were on. Now, if they are continuing in high school, 11th graders, and they are working towards the CDOS credential or the CDOS pathway, they can be exempt for whatever would have happened this year. So let's say the student was supposed to complete half of his work-based learning hours in his junior year, half next year in his senior year. He or she would be exempt from anything that was planned for the balance of this year, but they would have to continue next year on track to finish up whatever was planned or scheduled for next year. So we're not giving, you know, underclassmen a total waiver. We're only waiving what would have been taken during the COVID crisis, be that coursework or work-based learning. And this also, the CDOS slide also applies to students who are pursuing option 2, the CDOS, where you could take a test. There are 4 or 5 approved, department approved tests for earning your CDOS credential. Typically there's some coursework that go along with those tests. As long as the principal, in consultation with faculty, determines that the students met the CDOS learning standards, but was intending to take that option 2 test, they're exempt from that. Okay, now we can move on. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Safety nets, they all remain in effect for any student with a disability who has access to safety nets. For the purposes of your exemptions this year, we're considering them to be scores of 65 or performance level 3s for the most part on exempt exams. We're not recording a score of any kind on a student's transcript, but for the purposes of figuring out which kind of diploma a student has earned, whether they've accessed a safety net or not, the tests that are exempt are to be considered 65, so not needing a safety net. The only exception is that we have what's called the compensatory option, which I know most of you are aware of. So that's a student with a disability who can get a 65 on one test and compensate for a 45 on another test. They cannot use the exemption as a compensatory high score. So they cannot use it in that fashion. But for all intents and purposes, all other safety nets apply. Next. Endorsements, we're basically eliminating any exempt exam from the calculations for endorsements. So they're excluded from any calculation for determining honors or for determining masters, or mastery rather. So for an honors endorsement, if the student achieves a calculated average of 90 or above without rounding on all the other exams that apply to the diploma, they get the honors endorsement. If they were supposed to take 3 exams in June, those are all removed from the calculation. So they're just going to average the others, the other 2 or 5 if it's advanced designation. But you remove it completely from the calculation. We did get a question about that. There is a rule online that says you can't substitute more than 2 department approved alternatives for an honors endorsement. You still can substitute up to 2. We're not taking that away. We're just taking all of the exempt exams out of the calculation. For mastery, typically a student has to have 3 85 or better on math or science to get a mastery in math or a mastery in science. For any student that has an exemption this June, they can earn a mastery as long as they have at least 2 plus the exemption. So it's got to be 2 other exams plus an exempt exam at 85 or better to earn the mastery. If they were supposed to take 2 of them this year and have 2 exemptions, unfortunately, those students are a little bit out of luck. They would have to come back and try again, at least on one of those. So they need 2 exemptions, 2 85s and at least 1 exemption to qualify for mastery. And next. The CTE +1 pathway for the purposes of meeting a diploma requirement is waived. The pathway test is waived, okay? But this is a little bit tricky. So CTE programs are all different lengths. So some are 1 year, some are 1.5 years, some are 2 years. So if a student was enrolled in a department approved CTE program culminating in a pathway that they attest that they intended to take this June, and they've passed the courses required for a CTE program, then they're exempt from the pathway assessment, the 3 parts, the the portfolio, the performance, and the written. Or any portion that they were supposed to take this June. So I do understand, I've learned that some schools administer the 3 parts at different times. Whatever portion or the whole thing that was intended to be taken in June is waived, or the student is exempt from it. So that is for graduation purposes only. If you go to the next slide, I think we talk about the technical endorsement. We do. So this one requires a little bit of local investigation, I'll say, or local research. So because the programs are all different lengths, it may not be appropriate to be granting a student a technical endorsement just because they had the test waived, right? So, you know, programs that are shorter programs where the student really only completed maybe 50% of the program or 60% of the program and was not able to demonstrate, at least to your knowledge or to your CTE teacher's knowledge, that they had the technical skills needed for the endorsement, then the school may choose not to give the endorsement. They still have to give the waiver to the test for graduation, but they may not feel comfortable saying, yes, this student is technically proficient in welding, or this student is technically proficient in, Adobe graphic design, because the class we didn't have enough evidence to show that, or we were unable to continue in online learning, or for whatever reason. There could be a reason why there just wasn't enough evidence for the technical skills. For the longer programs and for programs that are continuing instruction, that determination might be different. You might say to them, yes, they get the diploma, no problem, but also they have been in my program for a year and 4 months. I'm comfortable saying, yes, they're technically proficient in whatever skill they were learning. So that's a local decision as to whether to give the technical endorsement. And you should really be thinking about how long is the program, what's the percentage of the unfinished part, whether the student really has demonstrated those skills. So that's going to be a decision you make at the school level. Next slide. Middle school students. So we know our middle school students can oftentimes start their high school coursework early in 7th or 8th grade. So first thing that we'll discuss is the LOTE requirements. So in middle school, if you would like your first credit in a language other than English, the rules say you have to pass 2 units of study, 7th and 8th grade, for example, and then pass the locally developed checkpoint A exam, or 1 accelerated unit of study in grade 8 and pass the checkpoint A. If your students were intending to take the checkpoint A test in June and they pass the coursework determined by their teacher, then the district can grant them their first unit of credit in LOTE. The same thing applies to accelerated students in grade 8. In grade 7, students don't earn diploma credit, right? So you might have a super accelerated student in Algebra 1 in grade 7. He doesn't actually get a high school credit for that, but he does take his Regents exam with him to high school as an assessment requirement. If that's the case, and you have students in grade 7 who completed their coursework and were successful, they too are exempt from that Regents exam in algebra or whatever, whatever they're taking it in. They do not need to pass the test in order to get that exemption, obviously. And in 8th grade, they do not need to pass the test in order to be granted the credit. Okay, next slide. These are the pieces of guidance we're working on. I know many of you might have questions about these. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer them. We are working hard, our Office of Bilingual Education, on coming out with what flexibilities will be available in earning the seal of biliteracy. So I don't have any answers for you on that yet, but they are coming, I promise, and they should be out soon. The other thing we're working hard on is how to record the COVID-19 exemptions on your school transcripts. So school transcripts are completely locally determined. So as an example, you can choose what to put on the transcript. Exempt, E for exempt, C for COVID-19, whatever makes sense to you. We're likely going to come out with guidance so that everyone does it the same way, and it will be clear to higher ed institutions. So I would hold off on making any decisions. More importantly, the data entry, and I don't know if counselors are typically required to be the people in your buildings that do this. Some are probably, and some are not. But there will be new codes for every exam that a student could earn an exemption in, that will have to be put into your, I want to say student management system, but you know, if your student management system can independently track a transcript that goes to a college and upload information to the RICS, there will be special codes for the RICS, is what I'm trying to get at. What goes on the transcript is obviously locally decided, but we will come out with some suggestions of keeping things consistent across the state. So that's also coming. So if you'd hold any questions on that until we can get you some good answers, and they should be coming fairly shortly, I would say, you know, before the middle of the month. And the August Regents decision. We, of course, are thinking hard about the August Regents decision. We have already made the decision that students will be exempt if they earn makeup credit in summer. So we're thinking the pool of August Regents takers might be pretty low. However, there are students who want to take it. So logistically, we don't know if we will be able to gather and administer an examination in person yet. So we've got to figure that out as, you know, first. We don't have a decision yet on August Regents exams. That will be coming. Whether it will come before there's some finality on summer school, I don't know, or during. But in any case, it is coming, and the Office of State Assessment is looking at all the options for that. And I think that's it. You know, you can always submit any questions you have to our GradRec email box, emscgradrec@nysed.gov. All of the guidance that's going up related to COVID closures are on our coronavirus COVID update page, which you can get to right from the SED homepage. It's right at the top of the screen, big pink box there. So everything is getting dropped there, and then we're linking to it also on our individual websites. But if you have any questions about grad requirements, assessment exemptions, earning credits, pathways, they should come right to the GradRec email box. And that is all I have. So I will take your questions. I don't know how you're going to organize this, but I'm happy to be here as long as you need me.
So we are going to try to respond to as many questions as possible, or answer to as many questions as possible, but I would encourage you to also email the questions, as Marybeth said, of your specific questions to the email that you see on your screen. One of the questions that came up in the chat box was, how many exemptions can a student receive?
There is no limit to the number of exemptions a student can receive.
The other question is, in terms of the career plans that students need to complete for any like CDAS or CTE endorsement, do they have to be completed at this point, career plans?
If it's possible, of course, we would like that to happen, just like we would like all courses to continue in their entirety. So if there's a methodology for completing those career plans, either through consultation via technology or even on the phone, if you know, I'm not as familiar as to how those plans evolve in a student's record. I mean, if they're done in consultation with the career teachers, the counselors, the student, however that is, if you can manage it, I would say it's beneficial to the student to have it. But obviously it is part of the CDOS requirements. And if it is not met because of the COVID closure, you can waive it.
The other question is with regards to the FLA, the checkpoint A for students that were going to retake, let's say a 9th grader or 10th grader is retaking the FLA or was going to take the FLA in June because they didn't pass that when they were in 8th grade, but they passed the course, you know, both in 7th and in 8th grade for that language. Are they exempt or must they take the FLA the following year in 2021?
They are exempt if they meet the criteria for intending to take, right? So the criteria that were on that slide, they would too be exempt.
Okay, great. So what if the student fails the course and there's no summer school? And
If the
so
student, right,
failed associated to that Regents, obviously.
right. Unfortunately, that is the situation where the student is not entitled to the exemption. The student will have to make up the credit when school resumes in 2020, in the 2020 school year, and will have to take the exam at the next administration.
Okay. So if a classified student, or it could be any student at this point, earned 65 on 4 of his or her required Regents, and that one Regents that we're going to intended to take, in the past received a 58 or even below that, would they still be able to graduate with a Regents diploma? And I guess the same thing holds truth in terms of the advanced Regents diploma and any outstanding Regents that were not passed. Like, would that student graduate with that designated diploma?
Right, so any student who was intending to take the test gets the exemption. In your first scenario where it was a student with a disability who had access to safety nets, you still consider the exemption of 65. So if they had 4 65s, the fact that they took it in the past has nothing to do with whether or not they get the exemption at 65 now. So they would earn the Regents diploma. But they have to fit the intended to take, again, exemption.
I know that some counselors have also asked if there's any new paperwork or forms that must be completed by districts with regards to these exemptions or waivers.
No, there are no additional paperwork or forms. Like, as I said at the end, there will be special codes that districts will have to include in their data upload to their regional information centers to indicate which students got which exemption. So that will all come out in the guidance around from our Office of Information and Reporting. But there's no additional documentation or approval forms that need to be submitted or collected by the districts.
Okay, thank you. See if Bob or Gloria want to jump in terms of additional questions that they've seen.
I've got a couple people who have their hands up, so I'm going to call on Laura.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for doing this Zoom meeting. This is very informative. I just have a question regarding U.S. history and students that are taking that course in 8th grade. Is that also a Regents exam that's considered exempt to get U.S. credit if they are taking that course culminating in the Regents in 8th grade?
Yes, any accelerated course in grade 8 for diploma credit, so it has to be the U.S. history that's aligned to the U.S. history Regents, the student would earn the credit and would be exempt from the test.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sheehan R. That's what I see. Here's a question. Sheehan R. Okay. Marissa DiMartino.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Rotunda, for picking me. Really quick, in terms of the task, if we have a student that was enrolled in school and then subsequently is prepping, is out of, a regular program, the regular schooling, and is on track towards receiving the task exam, will they get the exemption for the Regents for the courses that they completed that pertain to the Regents exams?
That's a good question. So I can think of this in a couple of scenarios. So if they pass the courses, right, related to the Regents exam that they're now in a task program for. So we'll use social studies, all right? They passed US history, but they didn't pass the Regents exam. Then they would be entitled to the exemption. If they did not pass US history and we're now in a high school equivalency program, we actually got this question. Passing their preparation for the task, social studies, does not entitle them to an exemption.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there some consideration based on how long ago that happened, or just the fact that they were in school and they passed that class, that's good enough?
Well, that one I'm going to ask you to send in. We might have to give a little more thought to that. We did say that intending included students who failed in the last year. So if you wouldn't mind sending that into GradRec, that might need a little more teasing out, and we might have to get in touch with you about when. And there's always going to be those anomalies.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Bob, I'm sorry, there is a question about, do parents have to request a superintendent determination at this point?
Well, yes. A superintendent determination would be applicable for students who were no longer prepping for a Regents exam for whatever reason, right? So I'm trying to think of a scenario. So say you have a 20-year-old who, you know, has been staying in school for whatever reason, life skills, CTE program, career training. I think if they're not engaged in AIS towards a Regents exam or, you know, makeup credit programs, that kind of thing, intending to take the Regents exam, I think you would still have to go through the process of the superintendent's determination.
Okay. There's another question about if a student who is actually turned 21 within this school year, and you know, this was their last shot at retaking all of their 5 exams, and they have yet to pass, but they have passed the course or courses, would they be able to receive all 5 exemptions?
You betcha.
Okay.
Stephanie
Thank you.
Wozniak.
Yeah, Wozniak, thank you. Good morning, Marybeth. Thank you so much for doing this and also for hosting. I had a question about if a student, for example, is a student with an IEP, they're planning on staying in school until they're 21. If they're 20 and they were planning on staying in school next year, and the only requirement they had left was, for example, the ELA Regents this June. They had failed it once before, but they weren't intending on sitting for it in this June, maybe because they didn't feel ready to sit for it again, or any other numbers of reasons. And we're planning on staying in school next year. Could they then say, or could their parents say they had no intention of taking it in June of 2020, and then they would still be eligible for school next year? I'm envisioning situations in which districts might be encouraging parents or students to take the exemption, even if they weren't intending on taking that last region prior to this June 2020.
Right. So the student had to actually have been intending. We actually, Stephanie, we just got this question and I pushed it up to our Office of Special Education. Your description is very clear. They were not taking it. You cannot say they were taking it just because that would then exit them from school. If they had no intention of taking it, their plan was to stay in school till they were 21. They are not, they can't be forced out of school, right?
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that with you so we didn't have a repeat of the superintendent's determination a few years ago where people felt pressured.
You're ahead of me. You are ahead of me. You probably thought of this days ago. It just came to Melissa and I the day before yesterday through another district who reached out to us asking us a very similar question. You know, if mom and dad don't want the exemption because the plan for their son or daughter was to remain in school because of their disability until 21 to continue receiving services. We will be putting out some guidance on that officially in writing. I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle it, whether we will also do the same thing we did before where if you remember after the first year of superintendent determination, we moved to a model where it had to be by parent request, right? So I'm not sure how we're going to handle it, but we're going to handle it and put it out there. But the description you gave is perfectly accurate. If the student had no intention of taking it, the school can't intervene and say, well, hey, you know, we're going to say he intended to take it so that then he'll get a diploma and we don't have to provide services next year. So we want to avoid those situations whenever possible.
And as a follow-up, if you don't mind me asking, similar to the superintendent's determination, because the superintendent's determination is for students with IEPs and falls under IDEA, but not necessarily all the grad requirements fall under the same regs. Right. Would the same situation apply here, like the superintendent's determination, in which it would be a parent decision? So if the student said, yes, I had an intention of taking the ELA in June 2020, but the parent said, no, we had no intention of you taking the ELA in June 2020, what would then occur there?
That's what I'm going to find out for you. That's
great,
the answer
I
do not have. So when we have sort of that disagreement between either parent student or parent school or student school, we're going to come out with guidance on that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Mark Palios.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Niska and Marybeth. This is great. I really appreciate it. And coincidentally, this question is similar. Talking about students with disabilities as the last question, but kind of going backwards. There was students who took exams prior to 2019, where we're talking about old exams, and they don't fall under those three intentions. But Regents exams are walk-in exams, so if this becomes kind of common knowledge amongst our students with disabilities and their network, I can see situations where parents will say, no, we actually did intend on having my kids sit and take this test. They didn't have the conversation with the counselor. They weren't enrolled in AIS or the class. They took it back in 2018, let's say, but they say to us now, we did intend on taking that test. My feeling is to not get into a fight with them because their intentions are their intentions, and now it's recorded and now it's known. What is your thought on that type of scenario?
I think that is, you're going to have to honor a student who says they intended to take the exam. I think if it's a situation where you really feel the student is going to be harmed by leaving school, right? So the student is, the IEP plan is for the student to stay until they're 21, or, I think it warrants a conversation between counselor, CSE chair, and mom and dad to discuss it. But I think in the end, if the student and the parents are in agreement that they are going to take advantage of this situation and claim their intention to take the test, then you have to honor that.
Okay, Brenda Herco.
Hi, my question was in regards to the endorsements that students can get. If a student had, let's say, an 85 on living environment and earth science, had an 80 on chemistry, and intended to retake that chemistry in order to receive the science endorsement, how do we indicate on a transcript that student, while not remove the chemistry grade, but indicate on the transcript that the student did receive that exemption in order to earn the endorsements?
Thanks for that question, Brenda. And that's actually one that Melissa and I have been working on over the past few days. In the situation you're describing, your student would not earn the endorsement because they already had a proven track record of the 80, right? And remember that exemptions are assumed at 65. If they had never taken the test where they got the 80, and this was their first attempt, yes, we could assume that possibly they could have scored higher, but you know, we're taking that out of the mix. So if you have a score history of 3 exams already, you cannot replace a score with an exemption to qualify for mastery.
Oh, okay.
I know.
I thought if they had intended to retake it, they could receive the endorsement.
Right, we're clearing this one up because we're getting this question a lot. So if they have a history of having taken it, they cannot replace a score that didn't meet mastery with an exempt score. If they never took it, then they can use the exempt score to meet the qualifications for mastery. So that's going to be the difference here.
Okay, great.
Okay, we'll add that to the FAQ in the next iteration of FAQ. It'll be right there for you to and there's an example Melissa created for it. On the contrary, I'll just follow up with that. So, and I hope I say this right, Melissa, if you're on, you're gonna have to butt in. Look for Melissa's hand, Robert, if I say this wrong. A student, let's say a student is looking for an honors endorsement to a regular Regents diploma, right? But they have more than 5 tests. You can take the combination of tests that most benefits the student, right? So let's say they got a 90 on 4 tests and a 70 on the 5th test, and they were set to take a 6th test that could count towards it this June. They get an exemption from that 6th test. You can take the combination of test scores that most benefits the student for honors. And we'll have an example in the FAQ about that too. But as far as mastery goes, if they have already proven they have a history of 3 test scores and they didn't equal 85 or above, they can't replace a test score with an exempt.
Okay, cool. I see Chris Shearer has her hand up. Okay. Emmy Lynn McGregor.
Hello. Thank you again for doing this. We live in a pretty rural area, and our concern is that we have students that were doing well, students with disabilities in their Regents tracked courses up until the closure, but now are not able to access. This learning environment is negatively impacting them in very social, emotional, cognitive ways. This platform doesn't work well with them, etc. So are we holding them accountable for still passing these last, quarter and a half? If they don't, then they just have to take it all over again?
No, the guidance that we're giving is that districts should continue instruction in whatever ways that's available for students, but only hold the student accountable for the instruction that they were able to access, right? So if the student is not, especially our students with disabilities, if, for example, you had a student with a disability who had a one-on-one aide in the classroom to help keep them focused or to be their scribe or, and obviously they cannot have that accommodation, right? Any new instruction for that student should not be graded. That's the Marybeth Casey opinion. It's not it's not a statewide piece of guidance. The state guidance says the student has met the learning outcome for the instruction that they were provided. And when you look at the instruction they were provided, they had to be able to access it. If they couldn't access it, just because you provided it doesn't mean you should hold them accountable for it. So does that make sense, Emily?
Mary Beth, I have a question. Well, some counselors do did have this same question. If a student transfers from either a different state or a different country past, let's say, algebra, and they were scheduled to take, they got the credit for the course, and they were scheduled to take the Regents in June. Would that child, would that student be exempt from taking the Regents?
Yes, they would.
Okay, Nancy Logan.
She's muted.
You gotta unmute yourself, Nancy. Oh, I have to do it. There's only 1,000 people on this. There's quite a few Nancys.
Bob, you could temporarily allow people to unmute themselves.
Okay, sorry, I think I'm unmuted.
Okay,
I had a question about the appeals, and I don't know if this has, the exemption from Regents has any effect on that. If we had students that, again, with disabilities that had retaken the Regents several times and they had between 62 and 64, they were, you know, some were going to take the test again in June, and some were just going to go with the appeals because they had taken it 3 times already, and gotten between 62, 63, 64. Do we still have to do the paperwork for the appeals, or are they automatically given the exemption?
Technically, you are supposed to do the paperwork for the appeal, because if they weren't intending to actually sit again.
Yeah, so some were and some weren't. So the ones that I know were intending to.
You don't have to do the paperwork.
Right, they would be exempt. The ones that I know and we have in writing that the parents said they're not going to take it, we're good with the appeal, then we would do the paperwork for the appeal.
You do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Heidi.
Yes, I have a question, a little different, but will there be SED guidance documents coming out to all of us about grading and about GPAs and those kinds of things? And if so, will that be mid-May also?
So we are working on some draft guidance around grading. We are not quite sure it will be issued, because technically grading, and you know this already, grading and placing of students is completely at the discretion of the local district. So we do see a benefit in creating sort of a standard across New York State for this crisis, just so that it's understandable on student records going forward what happened during this time. We have been in the curriculum office, I'll be honest with you, we've crafted some guidance around it, but it has to go up through the chain. So whether or not the commissioner or the chancellor will allow us to issue it is still a question, but we are trying to create some sort of consistency so that, you know, because this is not just going to be this year for this year's seniors. This is happening to all the students in our system. So 4 years from now, you know, a freshman who has multiple exemptions or strange things appearing on their transcript is going to have to be explained. So I'm hoping to get that pushed up and through. We will see.
Or yes, my superintendent wanted me to ask that specifically.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Heidi, and yeah. I don't know, can you poll on this? I'm just wondering if counselors would like to see, I mean, it would never be required because we're not, by law, we can't require you to do a certain thing. But would you like to see some sort of guidance come out of SED on that? Can you poll, Robert, or no?
Not on the fly.
Okay. Oh, I'm seeing lots of yeses here.
You can do a lot of thumbs
Maybe
up.
I'll ask if anybody thinks no.
Yeah, I think that's
Wow.
gonna be thumbs up.
That's great. Okay. Oh, we got one now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. That's helpful, actually, because I can say that I spoke to you, and you know, overwhelmingly, you seem to be in favor of us at least giving some, suggested strategies.
Okay, last question goes to Michelle Hartman. I would suggest that you, and this PowerPoint is on the website already, but you see the email address there for further questions that are going to get answered. So last question goes to Michelle Hartman. Go for it.
Michelle, you're muted.
Unmute myself. Okay, thank you. My question is about, we currently have students who are enrolled in AIS, and when we moved to online learning, the students had an online AIS prior to the announcement of the cancellation of the Regents. Do those students need to continue participating in the AIS to get the exemption, or because their intention is to take the exam, do they not? Is it okay to stop that particular part of the online learning?
No, they should continue to participate in any kind of continuity of education that you have available.
Okay. And then my second question is, we have students who were intending to do the independent or alternative study to challenge a Regents in August. If they do that, and the August Regents exams are canceled, can they still receive alternative credit, or do they have to wait until January?
No, in that case, they would have to wait till January, Michelle.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So unfortunately, is that time to close the meeting. And I want to thank, well, first of all of you for participating and coming in with your questions. Sorry we couldn't answer to all of them, but as you know, you can always email. You can always email me. You can always email NYSED, and you can always reach out, and we will do our best to get and I want to thank Marybeth Casey again. Can't thank you enough for helping us being coming to rate, like I said, and we truly appreciate you. I do want to, let Bob, get a director, take over this slide. So just hang in there. And everybody, definitely we're here all in this. We shall prevail. We will definitely prevail.
You're breaking up, Jeanette. I'm going to share my screen real quick to show you where these resources are. On the front page of our website, the coronavirus resources, click up. You'll also see the fall conference is also there. So if you're interested in coming to Syracuse Turning Stone, you can click on this coronavirus. You'll find many of the resources that that we have already put up, including the stuff from State Ed. Today's meeting is going to be linked right here. The PowerPoint is already here that we just used. It will be up shortly in a couple hours probably. Again, if you have any questions, please, I'll put that email from State Ed up on this website right here, so that if you have any more questions regarding graduation and so on, you could use that email. Anything else?
I want to say thank you to everybody who listened in today. Just the sheer number of people in this on this webinar is a testament to how much you're out there for your kids, and I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. And I want you all and your families to stay healthy and keep doing what you're doing. It's it's nice to see over. I think you had, how many did you have, Bob? 1,100.
No, we got to 1,000 and then it closed off.
And then it closed off, 1,000 people. So, I mean, you are, you're the liaisons between families and teachers and students and colleges, and it's remarkable what you accomplish every day, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. And a final commercial announcement, if you like what you saw today, you can support NYSED by becoming a member. If you're not a member, or renew your membership if it collapsed. If you have any questions about how to do that, email membership@nysed.org. And with that, I think we're going to close. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.